All right, so today we're going to talk about posing. Now, one of the inherent problems with working in Maya or working in a CG environment is that we rush to spline. We want to see our animation move, and we neglect the posing. Being trained as a traditional animator, pen on paper or pencil on paper, it has a bit of an advantage in that all you have is your poses, because each drawing is just a pose, and those poses have to be strong and have to work together until you shoot them. But in Maya, we tend to sort of gloss over that and just try to sort of mush it together. And by doing that, we neglect the posing, and posing really is the entire process. I always like to say to people with animation is posing is the process, motion is the result. So really there's nothing, in my opinion, in much of my favorite animation, there's nothing more important than your poses. And your poses can always be better, can always be pushed, they should always be explored. And so today we're gonna dive into this. And now remember, the process of animation really is just a series of poses arranged on a timeline, which when you play them back gives you the illusion of motion. All right, so here we have a series of poses. Now, if I show my rig here, this is my animation rig here, and I just draw a box around it and select all of my animatable controls, you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 poses. And the 7 poses is just this little whip of the hair coming up for some overlap. So it's really just 6 poses, but we'll say it's 7. Now, if we play these poses back, they work together well enough that we see some motion happening. Great. But it really is just 7 separate poses. We can see here we go. We have an anticipation pose. We have an extreme down pose, and then it builds up into this extreme pose here. So where do we start? What do we look for in solid posing? I have a little checklist I like to go through, and you know, I use it as much as possible. I've done so much animation now, and you'll be in the same boat at some point where the checklist is just sort of inherent in your head. But I go through this checklist myself to make sure I have I've covered all my bases. And you know, a lot of animation students will ask me, you know, I'll do a piece of animation that worked out quite well, and some people ask me, like, how did you do that? How did you get those results? And a lot of times I say I don't know. But the truth is, the way I work is I just make sure I've explored every aspect of my pose that I can. I use what I like to call the leave no stone unturned. Even when I have a pose that I think works, or a piece of animation that I think is working, I'm not afraid to dig in and go deeper and try to refine those poses even more, depending on how much time I have and how large the budget of the film I'm working on is. So my checklist for posing. Well, the first place we start is with reference. You can never have too much reference. You can shoot the reference yourself. You can go online and find reference, and you'll see that there's no shortage of reference online. I think those two are. Somebody's going to have to pay somebody else royalties. Who did it first, the Cult or Springsteen? I don't know. But there's loads of reference online. I feel you should probably shoot your reference. It's really important to get into the habit of shooting your own reference, especially when you want to animate it, because your reference will solve some problems that you'll have. You know, like which way are the hips going, which way are the shoulders going. You can step through it, and you can really find how the body mechanics are working. And the other great thing with shooting your own reference is you'll do things inherently in your performance, some little nuances that you would have missed had you just tried to animate out of your head. You'll go, oh, I lick my lips here, or I tug on my ear whenever I'm nervous, or anything like that. All these little pieces of what we call business will just add to your animation, add to your subtext, just make it more believable and ultimately more enjoyable to watch, which is the entire point. So reference is huge. What to look for is in your reference is my second item on my checklist is line of action. So I'm looking for a nice, clear line of action. You can see here, if we bring up our grease pencil, you can see that there's a line of action that's traveling through my body all the way to my leg. It's a nice, clear line of action there. And so I'm looking for a nice dynamic line of action that seems to work. And you can see from the head down to this leg as well, we got a bit of a line of action there that's appealing and nice to look at. So I'm always looking for a nice, broad, appealing line of action. Which brings us to my third item on my checklist is silhouette. Now, if we click this little light icon here, it'll turn everything black. And you can see that the silhouette is quite clear. We got a lot of negative space. It's pretty easy to read. If we remove that floor, it would be even easier. Which we could do, but I'm not going to because I can't. Anyway, so we're looking for a nice, clear silhouette where it's easy to read. You know, the guitar is not being lost here. If I move the camera around, you can see the silhouette becomes a little bit more difficult to read. But we're trying to get a silhouette that reads all the way across the board. You can see when we get into here, we get into this issue where the guitar is blending in to the body. It gets a bit more difficult to read. It's not as appealing. This is called a tangent. When you have different parts of the character, you are sharing the same space, and it flattens your character out. That's called a tangent. We want to avoid those tangents. So we pose for the camera, and we look here, and we see that we have a pretty solid silhouette. Next is twinning. Now, twinning's kind of a funny thing to look for. What twinning really just refers to is when you have two parts of the body that are twinning each other. So we mostly see it, you know, in places where the character is holding two hands out, where the hands look exactly the same, where the body looks the same. We can go in here and just quickly, if we hide our guitar and we can bring up our rig here, we can see that we have a little bit of a twist in the body. We're not only are we bent over this way, but we also have a bit of a twist going this way in the shoulders. So then in the hips we're going this way as well. So we don't have any twinning. The hands are different. The legs are offset from each other. They don't look the same. You can see there that the legs look different. This foot is flared out more than the other, and so we've avoided the problem of twinning. All right, so next we have balance. So let's just look at balance. And balance, surprisingly, is a pretty big one. I see a lot of animation where if you go and look at the pose, you'll see a lot of times that the balance will be off. You know, like the balance will be one way or the other, or like in the front here, we could, you know, you see a lot of this where it's too far forward, where you need to drag that foot up. But mostly what I see is when we're shifting the weight around, I'll often see people that have animation where they have the weight over a leg and they'll try to pick that leg up through their animation, and that's just not a solid pose. If you got to pick that leg up, obviously you have to have the weight over on this leg here as such, and that makes a lot more sense. So balance is a big one, and to see proper balance, you really want to go through, you know, you want to look at it from the top, you want to look at all these different angles to make sure your balance is solid. And it's, like I said, it's a pretty big deal. Following that is Contrapposto. Now, Contrapposto is just a term that just means basically that your shoulders and your hips have a nice bit of variance to them, where it shows a stretch on one side and a compression on the other. So what we want to see with Contrapposto, for example, if we were to just zero this stuff out, just for the sake of showing our Contrapposto, we want to see always, it doesn't have to be extreme, but we always want to see a little bit of stretch versus compression. So a pose like this, for example, you want to have, you know, whether it's a walk or whatever it is, you want to show a little bit of stretch this way on this side, a little bit of compression on this side. You just want to pick a side and go with it. And you can see if we go back to our original model here, we could throw a bit of that. But if we look at this, the extreme pose, you can see we have a stretch along this side, and we have some compression along this side. And that's our contrapposto. It just makes the pose feel a bit more dynamic. And lastly, what we want to look for is exaggeration. And exaggeration is really what the whole point of animation is. If you can do an action yourself without exaggeration, the old rule of thumb is, well, you might as well just shoot it live action and save yourself the time of animating it. Now, obviously, there's a lot of great animated films that and animators and animation performances that show a lot of subtlety, and it looks very realistic and organic, and that's perfectly fine. But overall, I like to think of animation as caricaturing emotion. So whenever I'm making poses, whenever I'm posing something out, I'm going even further than I want to. I want to push it as far as I can. If I want to show somebody sad, I want to show them really, really sad. If I want to show somebody happy, same idea. I want to show somebody playing guitar. Well, let's just push it. Let's push it as far as we can. Let's exaggerate it, because that's where the animation really comes to life. That's where the audience can have a lot of fun with it. That's where you get a good laugh, or you know, it just elicits emotion. It elicits even more emotion. And with animation, because it's animated, you can get away with it. You can push it. You can make it completely ridiculous, and the audience still loves it because it's animated, and they're sort of inherently wanting that kind of exaggeration. All right. So on the next video, we're going to just walk through the different tools on this rig and the rig that you'll be using, and how to use it. All right, so getting started. What I'd like you to do, the first thing I'd like you to do is go to the Lesson 1 Intro to Animation on the CG Spectrum box site here. And we go into that, and we want to go into Supportive Material. And under Supportive Material, you will see Morpheus Rig Pack Lesson 1. I would like you to right-click on that and download it. Right here, third option down. Once that's downloaded, I want you to go to Maya, File, and I want you to set Projects. And I'd like you to set the project to that Morpheus Rig Pack Lesson 1. When you just hit Set, it's going to tell you that it maybe needs to make a workspace or something, or maybe not. If it asks you to make a default workspace, you can just say yes. Once that project is set, let's go to File, Open Scene, and we're going to go into Rigs. And you're going to see there's going to be two scene files. There's a Morphe Clean and a Morphe Stripe. I'd like you to use the Morphe Stripe. And let's open that up. Here we go. Here's our Morphe Stripe. If you don't see this Morphe Stripe, just hit the number 6 and it'll bring up your textures. You should be good to go. Now there's a few things I like to do before I start. First thing I like to do is I go into Show and I hit None, and everything disappears. And then I go in and hit NURBS Curves and select Polygons. And you can see before I did that, when it comes in with all showing, you can see there's the joints are showing. I can see the joints around the eyes, and I can see the camera for the face. I don't want to see all that stuff. So I just start with None, and all I want to see is the NURBS Curves, which is my rig. And then I also want to obviously see the polygon so I can see what the rig is moving. I've set this rig up in FK. Meaning that forward kinematics, all that really means is that the spine and the arms are moving in rotation only and not rotation and translation. I do that because I think it's just easier to start with. I myself prefer to animate in IK now after I've been doing it for a while. You might as well, but to start out, we're going to just use FK arms and spine. And it doesn't matter that it doesn't make any sense to you right now. All that matters is that you have control over this character. Now, I've mistakenly left this neck thing in there, and we don't really want that. The only thing this thing does is it lifts the head off the body. It does the same as far as rotations go. It does the same as the neck. But we don't really want it there. So I'm just going to make with it selected, I'm going to hit this button over here, my channel box. I'm on display layers. I'm going to hit this button, and I'm going to make a display layer for it. I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to call it head underscore mover, and hit save, and I'm just going to hide it. All right, and the last thing I'm going to do to get myself, not the last thing I'm going to do, the next thing I'm going to do to get myself set up here is I'm going to select the neck. All right, that's the head instead, sorry. I'm going to select the head, and I'm going to go over here into the channel box editor, and I'm going to ask the head to follow the neck. And the difference with that is if I move the neck, the head is sort of, it doesn't really follow it the way I want it to follow it. The head stays pivoted to the world space. So if I move this to neck, now when I move the neck, it's more of an FK follow thing. And it's just easier for me to pose, and it means I don't have to like reverse engineer any of my animation. I just find it an easier system. Next, what I want to do is I want to go up here to my selection panel, and I'm going to turn everything off except for this one panel here, which is my NURBS curves. And what that does is it makes it that the only thing I can select are these NURBS curves. I can't accidentally select a joint. I can't accidentally select any geo. It's just these NURBS curves. And why I want to do that, I'm going to just delete these keys that come in. And why I want to do that is I don't want to mistakenly set a key on anything. And I want to work in auto key down here, so make sure your auto key's turned on, and then I'm just going to draw a big box. Now I'm confident, because I can only select the NURBS curves, I'm confident that I'm selecting only the things I want to animate. And I hit S, and I set my first key. Now, anytime I move anything, it's just automatically going to set a key there. So let's, for fun, let's do a pose on let's do like I just won some money pose. Why not? So the first place I like to start when doing my poses is I start with the COG here. The COG obviously it affects everything, so it's a big one. And I like to, sort of as a rule of thumb, I like to keep my COG, if I can, I like to reserve it for translations only and use my rotations on my spine. So I'm just going to set I'm going to put it over this foot. I'm going to take this foot here, and I'm going to rotate it out. Just a rule of thumb, what I find a lot of people do when they first start posing is they neglect rotating the feet out, and the feet are always pointing straight, and that, to me, that just looks very CG. So I always like to make sure that my feet are rotated out. Because I've stretched my spine up here a little bit, I'm going to grab this foot, and over here in the foot roll, if I just select foot roll, and then I just move the word foot roll so it highlights in blue, and I move over to the right, and then I middle mouse and drag, you can see I can move that foot roll back and forth, and I can get that foot up there a little bit. I'll do the same for this one. It needs to be up on his toe as well. Next, I want to get a shape for my spine here, and I want to get the spine. I'm going to just grab these two spine controllers, and I'm just going to rotate them this way. And then this thing is my hip controller. And this thing is one of my favorite controllers because it really helps to shape that spine. And if I have the spine bending over this way at the top, then I'm going to take this and bend it the opposite way. And here you can see we start to get that stretch and compression. You can see if we go too far, the knee starts to twist, and we have this little thing here to help us figure out that twist, or we should. But what it's basically telling us is that our we're stretching that too far. So maybe we can just back that up a little bit. All right. Next, I want to get the arms up there. Well, actually, let's get the head going first. Now, everything so far is pretty straight. I haven't curved. I'm just working on the curvature of the body this way. But I also want to make sure I'm working on the curvature of the body this way. Right? And also, I want to be working on the curvature of the body this way in rotation Y a little bit. Like that. And the head as well. Oops. There we go. Just want to make it, you know, as interesting as possible. And we have this curve here. That's why I want you to use this one, because this curve is showing us how our body is curving. I'm going to push him forward a bit. You can also take this, and you want to be careful with it, but you can take this hip controller again and push it forward a little bit, and you can make you can start making it an even more interesting stretchy pose. All right, so now the arms. Now, this guy here I don't really use. It's a translatable shoulder control, and the reason why I don't use that is because our shoulders don't really move like that. I use this one instead because our shoulders roll when they go up. So let's roll that up. Let's roll this up. Get a nice stretch. Rotate it around a little bit. Can't go too far. Rotate this hand. And now let's get this one. I'm going to rotate this shoulder back a little bit. Get this elbow over slightly. We're starting to get a nice look here. The shoulders on Morpheus, at this point, I think the next version of Morpheus, they're getting that sorted out, but the shoulders right now are a little bit tricky. They're just a bit clunky. Well, I'm not worried about the face right now, because if the pose can sell it, then the face is just sort of like icing. Now, the hands. Let's take a quick look at the hands. So the first thing I like to do when posing a hand is I grab this middle section here. And I like to, there's these two controllers right here called relax and cup. And so I'm going to go into relax a little bit and see what I get there. And it just gives us, I find Morpheus's hands, you know, they're kind of really blocky here. So I'd like to go in here and just sort of break up the shape of that hand a little bit. Like that. And then we can go in and curl those fingers in. And the thumb also is a little bit tricky with Morpheus, but we can get there. There we go. And then let's do the same thing with this hand. Let's select the middle section. Let's go relax. Let's see. Yep. Let's go cup. Let's go curl. Let's go thumb curl. There we go. So I'm excited. Somewhat excited. Let's do our check. Let's say, here's our pose here. So let's go through our check. Well, I didn't have any reference. I pulled it out of my head. So I failed the first check on my checklist. Whoops. Okay, let's look at my line of action. Do I have a clear line of action? I feel I do. Coming all the way through down to the body. It's nice and clear. I got a stretch on one side. I got compression on the other. I'm happy with it. What else we got here? Next is silhouette. Well, how does my silhouette look? Let's just turn off these NURBS curves and turn off this light. Well, that's a pretty clear silhouette, I think. If I rotate around, looks pretty good. Yep. I think that reads. I got some negative space here. If I move this way, that silhouette's not as strong. But here the silhouette's quite strong. A little bit of a bump here I don't like, but that's more of a rig issue and less of a posing issue. It's hard to get that ironed out there. Twinning, do I have any twinning? Nope. I think my twinning is fine. Everything is, you know, I got asymmetry throughout, which is good. The eyes are twinning. The eyebrows are twinning. I could break that up, but I'm not worried about that right now. Balance, how's my balance? It's pushed, but it still feels real. Feels like he's not going to tip over. It feels like he's unbalanced on the side, from the side. He's imbalanced from the front. From the top, it looks okay. I think he looks like he's not going to fall over. Good. Contrapposto. Well, we see that we have our contrapposto here. We have the hips are curved this way. The spine is curved this way. We have our stretch and our compression. Our contrapposto is good. And exaggeration, well, I think it's pretty well exaggerated. I mean, let's see what we could do to push it. I mean, we could do things like we could lift this foot up. We could bring this knee in a little bit. We can roll this foot down, and then we're going to grab this toe, or sorry, the ball roll, and roll the ball down. We can bring this arm here, maybe out a little bit, bring the shoulder up, you know, like that. So we can exaggerate it, sure, and then we can take it even further if we want to. We can stretch it up like that. If we really want to get a stretch on it, you know, we can really play with it a bit more. But I think the exaggeration looks pretty good. That even looks a bit better, actually. Nicely exaggerated. And that's basically it. That's a relatively strong pose. You know, it's kind of a for excited. It's a little bit stock. I think you can make it a bit more interesting by shooting some reference or just playing with, like, you know, how excited this person is. Think of your character's backstory. Think of what they're excited about, what's happened in their life, and that will help you push your reference and your poses even further. I mean, the internet is loaded with people being excited. I always like to watch those videos of, like, soldiers coming home and their dog is freaking out. You know, that's really fun. You sort of get a different view of a sort of a different emotion. I also like to think about one of my favorite poses to assign is pretending to be brave, which is different than being brave. Pretending to be brave is a different emotion, and things like that really help to isolate what it is in your pose that is telling the audience something different than what the person thinks. And that has to do with subtext, and we'll get into that in the further lessons. But for now, that's it with posing. Yeah, have fun, and I can't wait to see your work. Bye-bye.